Imagine spending 3,000 years becoming one of the greatest stories ever told, only for Christopher Nolan to walk into the room, look at Homer in the eye, and say, "Yeah, I have some notes," because that's exactly what happened, and somehow it actually worked. Quick heads up before we dive in. This episode contains major spoilers for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Now, to be clear, we're not going to recap every single frame, name every background character, or cover every minor detour. We'd be here all day, but we're going to break down the biggest moments, the major changes, and the key parts that actually matter to the story. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and want to go in completely blind, this is your chance to hit pause, row away, and come back later. For everyone else, let's get into the mayhem. Welcome back to Myths and Mayhem, where gods create problems, kings make them worse, and heroes usually solve them after doubling those problems first. A few days ago, I went to see The Odyssey, and sitting there in the theater, it hit me. I run a channel called Myths and Mayhem, and this is the biggest, most ambitious movie on Greek mythologies to hit the theaters since I started the channel. It would be essentially a crime against Olympus if I didn't take a chance to review it. So today, we're diving into Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. But this isn't a standard movie review. We're not going to debate the cinematography, the performance, or the box office numbers. Instead, we're going to focus entirely on the one thing everyone is arguing over, the changes. And I'm not here to decide whether Nolan's version is better than Homer's. I'm here to ask a different question. Why did he change what he changed? Because here's the thing, people like to act like mythology has one correct version. It doesn't. Long before Homer ever wrote The Odyssey, stories like this were being told around campfires, in marketplaces, at festivals. Every storyteller added something, removed something, emphasized something different. Homer wasn't the first bard. He was just one of the greatest. 3,000 years later, Christopher Nolan has stepped into that same tradition. Some of his choices stay remarkably close to Homer, while others couldn't be more different. Today we're putting them side by side, not to decide who's right, but to understand why the story changed, and to see how the movie about surviving monsters became a movie more about surviving yourself. Spoilers ahead, let's get into it.
Live from Mount Olympus is MON.
Welcome back to Mount Olympus Network. Today's programming features one mortal attempting to explain 3,000 years of Greek literature.
That's adorable.
He's actually asking the right question.
Which is?
Not whether Nolan changed the story, but why.
We'll be checking his work as we go. Back to the mortal.
Before the bard even opens his mouth, the movie gives us a title card, a time of apparent magic. Not magic, apparent magic. And that one word is doing a lot of work, and it's going to keep doing it for the next 3 hours. Now, Nolan, he's not pretending that this is history. He's reminding us it's a story. Because the film opens on Bard, a storyteller performing the fall of Troy for a room full of listeners. A clever nod as to how these myths actually survived. Long before anyone wrote down what we call the Odyssey, people were singing it, changing it a little over time. Homer's poem does have a bard in it, Demodocus, who sings about Troy while Odysseus quietly falls apart. But framing the entire epic as one man's performance is Nolan's invention. It tells you up front that you're not getting an objective history, you're getting a telling of it. The bard's chant lands on a beach at Troy, where a giant wooden horse is just sitting there, buried in the surf. In Homer, it's a straightforward gift the Greeks leave behind. Nolan complicates it. The Trojans genuinely believe the Greeks are returning the horse as an offering to Athena, a shared god. So they roll it toward the temple on shaved logs, not wheels, on purpose, quietly fixing the age-old "why would anybody roll a horse on wheels" into their own city plot hole. It's a small change that reframes the Trojans as respectful instead of gullible, which makes what happens next land a lot worse. Next, we get a hard cut from ancient Troy to present-day Ithaca. Penelope shouts at the bard to stop the song. She doesn't want to hear the story of a husband who never came home. Behind a translucent screen, she is quietly unweaving the burial shroud that she's been using to stall the 108 suitors currently eating her out of house and home. That shroud trick is straight out of Homer. What's new is the screen itself, a thin, glowing wall that hides her from the suitors just as pointedly from us. Remember that screen, it comes back later. At this point, Telemachus confronts the ringleader of the suitors, Antinous, and his ally Polybus. Antinous mocks Telemachus as a kid pining for a father that he can barely remember. Meanwhile, a beggar gets let in at the door and Antinous wants to throw him out, but a convenient thunderclap scares the suitors off before things can escalate. It's a small scene, but it sets up exactly why these same arrogant men let in another disguised beggar later in the third act. Next, we see a run of flashbacks that fill in the man before the war, a younger Odysseus sparing a puppy who will grow up to be Argus, stringing a bow that takes real strength to draw, getting gored by a boar that scarred him on the leg. Then we get the draft lottery. The movie first tells you that Antinous nobly bought out the draft spot of a farm boy named Sinon. Later we learn the truth. Antinous was the one who was drafted, and Sinon begged to trade places so that Antinous could send money home to Sinon's father. Now Antinous never sent it. In the wreckage of Troy, a dying Sinon physically hands the draft lot to Odysseus. None of this is in Homer. It's Nolan building an entire debt of guilt that Odysseus will have to carry. Odysseus tells Penelope that he has to go to war, or Agamemnon will sacrifice Telemachus just as he did his own daughter. And so she gives him her pin of Athena to carry with him. Back in present day, we finally meet Odysseus. He's not standing triumphant on the deck of a ship. He's walking on the beach of Ogygia with Athena in human form, looking completely broken. After years of numbing his pain with lotus flowers, the nymph Calypso is finally forcing him to piece his fractured memory back together. This movie isn't asking, how did Odysseus survive? It's asking, what did surviving cost him?
Live from Mount Olympus, this is MON.
Early review. The mortal has noticed this isn't really an adventure story.
It becomes one.
Eventually, but Nolan begins with what's left after the adventure ends.
He also caught something interesting. I'm apparently the only unemployed Olympian in this movie.
You do realize he's hinting that my appearance isn't what it seems.
I did now. Back to the mortal.
Homer's poem doesn't tell the island adventures in chronological order. Instead, Odysseus tells almost the entire journey as one long flashback. Nolan keeps that same storytelling approach, cutting between Odysseus recounting his own traumatic voyage and Telemachus' own journey to Sparta. Now, on the island of Cyclopes, Polyphemus survives. The playbook, it doesn't. In Homer, Odysseus gets Polyphemus drunk and tells him that he is nobody, blinds him, and escapes underneath the bellies of sheep. Nolan nearly cuts all of it. No wine, no name trick. What survives is the blinding and a different escape. His crew wraps themselves in sticks to slip past a blind Polyphemus, feeling his sheep as they leave the cave. Nolan adds one extra detail. After he is past Polyphemus, Odysseus fires an unnecessary arrow into the blind giant, purely to hurt him. It's an ugly echo of overreach and a violation of hospitality, and it costs him. Polyphemus is a son of Poseidon, and the seas take it personally for the rest of the trip. Back in present day, just before Telemachus leaves for Sparta, the movie quietly flips a major dynamic. In Homer, Telemachus talks down to his mother, at one point literally informing her that speech is men's business. It's not a great look for a secondary hero. Nolan, he reverses it here. Penelope is the one pulling the strings, telling Telemachus how to handle the suitors and invoking Zeus's law of hospitality herself. She's never spoken over again for the rest of the film. It's a small swap with a big ripple. It establishes Penelope as the sharpest mind in the room, making her choices later in the film hit that much harder. Telemachus reaches Sparta, where Menelaus and a visibly scarred Helen are celebrating a wedding. Nolan gives Helen a scar as an implied punishment for Menelaus, recoloring the face that launched 1,000 ships into something much sadder. Menelaus gives to Telemachus his own memory from inside of the Trojan horse. Days spent cramped, men drowning in the tide, sitting in their own filth, a soldier stabbed through the wood and silenced before he can scream. The same story heard from the bard, just told from a different, traumatized angle. Winning a war and surviving a war are two very different things. Meanwhile, back in the flashback, Odysseus' crew are looking for supplies and are ambushed by the Lystragonians, here reimagined as armored giants who hurl Greek soldiers into magical tree cages and crush all of the fleet by hand except for one. Odysseus saves his second in command, Eurylochus, from the wreckage. But that favor, it doesn't last. Eurylochus leads a soft mutiny, walking the survivors straight into Circe's house. Circe feeds them a stew that tethers them by strands of tripe, and then reshapes their faces into pig snouts with her bare hands, a terrifying, visceral spin on the myth. Odysseus doesn't sleep with her or use magic herbs to win. He takes her sister, a transformed crow, as hostage for leverage.
Finally, giant cannibals, body horror. Now this feels like Greek mythology.
And somehow, the mortal is talking about betrayal instead of the monsters.
Because the giants aren't what nearly destroys Odysseus. His own crew is...
That's considerably less fun.
More accurate, though. Back to the mortal.
Now, if you think that the Odyssey is just an adventure, this next scene will change your mind. The underworld in this film isn't just about ghosts. It's PTSD made visible. Sinon's ghost appears. Odysseus is already carrying Sinon's draft lot from Troy. But here's where that shade reveals the brutal truth. Antinous never paid his father. The debt is real. Tiresias then delivers the bleak prophecy that only Odysseus will return home. Following that, King Agamemnon warns Odysseus that his own wife murdered him when he got home, advising him to return in disguise. Then the ghosts of Odysseus' dead soldiers rise up and chase him out of Hades. He is quite literally running from his own guilt. After leaving the underworld, they have to sail past the island of the Sirens. Now, Homer's sirens promise hidden knowledge. Nolan keeps that promise, but changes what the promise actually is. Instead of revealing secrets of the world, these sirens reveal the truth Odysseus has been trying to bury. They weaponize memory, regret, and fear, forcing him to confront the voices inside of his own head. From there, just like in Homer, favorable winds ultimately carry the crew toward the island of the sun god. But while still far enough away, Odysseus tries to get them not to go. But the crew refuses. So he makes them take an oath that they will not eat the sun god's cattle. But when they land, the wind traps them there. Day after day, the wind refuses to change. Their supplies ultimately run out, and hunger slowly does what monsters couldn't do. Eventually, the starving crew breaks their oath and slaughters the sacred cattle. In Homer's poem, Helios' daughters witness the crime. Nolan removes the divine observers entirely. There are no witnesses, just desperate men making a terrible choice. But the moment the first bite is taken, everything changes. The winds finally shift. The crew scrambles aboard the ship and pushes away from the island, believing they've escaped the consequences. They haven't. No sooner have they cleared the shore than Zeus unleashes a monstrous storm. A bolt of lightning tears the ship apart. As the wreckage is swallowed by the sea, only one thing is heard is a desperate scream, Charybdis, then silence. Which brings us back to Ogygia. We finally understand why Odysseus is broken when the movie begins. Calypso has spent years using the lotus flower to dull his memories, but you can't outrun them forever. Eventually, he pushes away from the island in a simple driftwood raft, and flashbacks, they're over. From this point on, the story and Odysseus can only move ahead. Now back in Sparta, before Telemachus leaves, Helen tearfully apologizes to him for the total collapse of civilization. She acts as the film's sin eater, setting a heavy tone for the return to Ithaca. Now in Homer, the suitor's plot to kill Telemachus is foiled quietly by Athena. Nolan doesn't let him off so easy. Assassins disguised as priests ambush Telemachus and his Mentor at the Temple of Zeus. Now Mentor dies, but Odysseus, who had arrived home in secret and disguised as a scarred veteran using the name of Sinon, springs from the shadows and slaughters the attackers. Traumatized by the ambush, Telemachus begs Penelope just to choose a suitor so that the rest will leave. Then he'll only have to deal with one. Penelope's answer is a massive swing. She declares that she has sat on an empty throne for 20 years because only a man is allowed to fill it. She doesn't want vengeance. She wants her husband. But before the politics can resume, we get the scene that wrecks people 3,000 years later. Odysseus' old dog Argus has been waiting for 20 years. Nobody else recognizes the beggar at the gates, but Argus, he does, instantly. He wags his tail once and then dies. Because dogs don't care about crowns or reputations. They just know you. Telemachus watches this happen, and in a moment, that quiet moment, he realizes that the beggar is his father. During the feast, Odysseus slips Antinous the draft lot, rattling him completely. But the true emotional climax happens when the hall clears. Odysseus sits across from Penelope, separated by that translucent screen from Act 1 for the first time in 20 years. He isn't speaking as a king. He's speaking as a broken man, confessing his soul to a wife who has no idea she is speaking to her husband. He confesses that the wooden horse broke Zeus's oldest law of hospitality, and then comes with the twist that the entire movie has been building toward. A flashback reveals what really happened when the gates of Troy opened. The Greeks were savage butchers. Odysseus watched an innocent Trojan girl get slaughtered on the steps of Athena's temple. The human form of Athena that Odysseus has been seeing the entire time, she wasn't the goddess. She was a trauma hallucination of that murdered girl. Penelope listens, horrified, realizing that her husband and his men are the legendary people from the sea who destroyed the Bronze Age.
Update from the review desk. The mortal has officially stopped talking about mythology and started talking about guilt.
Again,
Because that's the movie Nolan actually made. He's reviewing the film, not reciting Homer.
I also appreciate that the mortal finally brought the screen back up. Chekhov would be proud.
Some symbolism takes time. Back to the mortal.
This news causes Penelope to be done waiting, and so declares the contest. And the contest is exactly what you remember. String the bow, thread the arrow through the 12 axes. Every suitor fails. The beggar, he steps up and then plays like he can't string it either. But the moment that Penelope looks away, he strings it effortlessly and then strums the bow. And the room goes dead silent as they realize whose house they're standing in. To be honest, this part gave me goosebumps. He fires the arrow and the slaughter begins. But Nolan makes you realize something profound. The real climax happened the moment he strummed the bow. Everything after that was just consequence. Telemachus takes out Melanthius in the weapons room and then drops a sword to his father. Odysseus slaughters all of the suitors who oppose him, saving Antinous for last, forcing Sinon's draft lot into his mouth before killing him. Now here is where Nolan takes his biggest step away from Homer. In Homer, the families of the dead suitors gather for a civil war, and Athena literally descends from Olympus to force a peaceful ending. Nolan cuts out the goddess entirely. No miracle ending. Instead, Odysseus looks at what his victories have cost him and then refuses to take the throne. He then hands it to Telemachus and then sails west with Penelope into self-imposed exile. Peace is something broken people have to choose for themselves. We then get one last flashback showing the wooden horse burning to the ground.
Final verdict: the mortal believes Christopher Nolan earned the right to change the ending.
He deleted Athena. I assumed she'd be furious.
He didn't remove me. He removed the need for me. The humans had to choose peace on their own. That's actually a very Greek lesson.
Which means the review passes. For now, back to the mortal.
This movie is obsessed with people refusing the simple explanations that they were handed. The title card warns that this is only apparent magic. And by the end, every god Odysseus met on Ogygia might just have been a grieving man's own guilt dressed up in a shape that he could bear to look at. Does changing the ending, cutting the puns, turning gods into ghosts make this a bad adaptation? No. Homer wasn't reporting facts. He was a bard making choices for his audience. Christopher Nolan did exactly what storytellers have always done. He didn't treat the Odyssey like a checklist. He treated it like a story about guilt, leadership, identity, and what war leaves behind. When you stop asking the question, is this accurate? And start asking, is this true emotionally? The movie becomes a masterpiece. So in conclusion, is Christopher Nolan's Odyssey accurate? Down to the axe handles in places and nowhere close in others. But that was never really the right question. Argue with me down in the comments which change you would have kept exactly the way Homer told it and which ones you're glad that Nolan cut. Now we're going to get our own crack at this full epic eventually. Every island, every ghost, no 3-hour runtime pushing us through it. But first, Heracles still has labors left, and he's not done making questionable life choices. 3,000 years from now, somebody is going to adapt Nolan's version too, and that's not a loss. That's just the next bard's turn. Until then, stay curious, stay legendary, and if anyone asks who saved the day, don't say nobody. Nolan already used that name on someone else. Say Sinon. See you soon. And if you're enjoying Myths and Mayhem, hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes.